Here's a question nobody is asking. In 1950, the world had 2.5 billion people. Today, it has 8 billion. That's the most dramatic population explosion in human history, and it didn't happen evenly. It happened in specific places, in specific languages, which means that the linguistic map of the world is being redrawn right now in real time. Here's what the data actually shows. The language most people think is fastest growing is actually plateauing. The language everyone assumes is dying is on track to become one of the 3 most spoken languages on Earth. And the one genuinely exploding, like nothing recorded in history, is doing something that has never happened to any language ever. Not Latin, not Arabic, not Mandarin at its peak. It's being chosen voluntarily by 1 billion people who don't have to. Welcome to the Airlearn Language Show. Today, we're ranking 5 of the fastest growing languages on Earth, and I'm tracking 3 things for each one because they tell very different stories. First, raw growth in total speakers. Second, growth rate as a percentage. And third, growth in learner demand, who's actively choosing to learn it. Before we jump in, if this video makes you want to actually learn one of these languages, check it out on Airlearn. It focuses on context, practice, and retention. Links in the description. Now, let's count down. At number 5 is Portuguese, from Portugal, a small country on the western edge of Europe. 10 million people, smaller than Ohio. The Portuguese language has 260 million speakers. That gap, 10 million versus 260 million, tells you everything you need to know. This language left its home continent so long ago and traveled so far that it essentially became a different language's problem to carry forward. And the carrier? It's not who you think. Most people say Brazil. And yes, 215 million speakers, largest economy in Latin America, a cultural powerhouse. Brazil matters. But Brazil isn't the growth story anymore. The growth story is Africa, Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, Sao Tome and Principe. Every one of them is growing fast. Angola is projected to nearly triple its population by 2100. Mozambique could quadruple. And in both countries, Portuguese is the language of government, law, education, and critically economic access. By 2050, Portuguese is on track to add 37% more native speakers. Not from Portugal. Not even mostly from Brazil, from sub-Saharan Africa, which is simultaneously one of the fastest growing regions economically and demographically. Number 4 is the entry that's going to surprise most people, Mandarin Chinese. 1.1 billion native speakers, the language of the world's 2nd largest economy, a UN official language, the language that every business school in America was urgently adding courses for in 2010. It's number 4 on a list of fastest growing languages. Not number 1, 4. Here's why. China's population peaked around 2022 and is now in the decline. The country that built Mandarin's billion-speaker base is running out of new speakers to add. The growth engine that powered Mandarin's rise isn't stalling. It's going into reverse. That's the demographic side. But there's a second thing happening that's just as significant. In the early 2000s and early 2010s, Mandarin was the obvious bet. China is growing at 8 to 10% a year. Of course, you learn the language. The ROI was easy to argue, but the learner demand for Mandarin has plateaued in Western markets, and in some places, it's actually declining. Geopolitics changed the calculations. Companies that were building China for strategies a decade ago are hedging, diversifying, and some exiting entirely. The clean narrative that drove the Mandarin boom got complicated. I want to be clear, Mandarin still matters enormously. If you're doing business in East Asia, navigating supply chains, or working with one of the most sophisticated technology and manufacturing ecosystems on Earth, Mandarin is essential. Nothing about that changes. But this list is about momentum, not scale. And on momentum, the biggest language in the world is losing ground. Let me give you a number that's hard to wrap your head around. Between 2001 and 2011, Hindi gained 100 million speakers. Not over a century, not over 50 years, 1 decade. No language in recorded history has added that many speakers in 10 years from a single country. For context, 100 million people is the entire population of Germany added to one language in 10 years. Here's the engine. India just overtook China as the world's most populous country with over 1.4 billion people. And unlike China, India's fertility rate is still above replacement level in the Hindi-speaking heartland, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. These are among the most densely populated places on Earth, and they are still growing. The demographic fuel here isn't running out. But what makes Hindi genuinely interesting beyond the sheer numbers is what's happening online. India's Digital India initiative brought hundreds of millions of first-time internet users online over the last decade, and it brought many of them online in Hindi. Hindi language content on YouTube has become one of the largest content ecosystems on the platform. WhatsApp, news sites, streaming, social media, the digital world in India is increasingly operating in Hindi. It is now one of the top 5 languages on the internet. That happened recently, and it's not slowing down. There's one more layer that most people outside India miss: Hindi as an internal glue. India has 22 scheduled languages and hundreds of others. When a Tamil engineer from Chennai and a Punjabi businessman from Amritsar need to work together, and increasingly they do, in India's growing professional economy, Hindi is often the bridge. This is politically contested, especially in South India, where the debate around Hindi is real and heated. But functionally, Hindi's reach inside India is expanding. Outside India, learner demand is still modest. Hindi isn't yet a global second language, but in the world's most populous country, with its youngest major population driving one of the fastest growing large economies on Earth, 100 million speakers per decade is not a fluke. That's trajectory. Here is the most single counterintuitive fact in global linguistics today. French is one of the fastest growing languages on Earth. Go ahead and push back. I can hear it. French is declining. English ate French. The French themselves are fighting a losing battle against Anglo-Saxon cultural dominance. French is what your grandparents studied. Here's the stat. More than 60% of the world's French speakers are now in Africa. Not France, not Quebec, not Belgium. Africa. There are 29 countries where French is an official language. The majority of them are on the African continent. Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Cameroon, the DCR, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Madagascar, Gabon, Guinea, countries with some of the highest birth rates anywhere in the world. Countries where the population isn't plateauing, it's exploding. Africa's total population is set to double by 2050 and double again to roughly 4 billion people by 2100. Those aren't speculative projections. Those people are already born or nearly born. The demographic math is locked. Now sit with this specific number. The Democratic Republic of Congo has over 100 million people right now, making it the most populous French-speaking country on Earth, larger than France. Its population is projected to hit 300 million by 2100. 300 million in one country. In French, run all of that forward, and French could reach 700 million speakers by 2100. Some estimates push past 800 million. Either figure puts French on the top 3 languages of the 22nd century. And here's the thing. That's not driven by Paris promoting French culture. It's driven by Kinshasa, Abidjan, Dakar, Douala. Cities that most Western media barely covers are quietly becoming the centers of gravity for one of the world's greatest languages. Globally, French is still the second most studied foreign language after English. It has deep roots in international law, diplomacy, and the UN system that aren't going anywhere. French isn't a language in decline. It's a language in transformation. It's ceasing to be European and becoming African. And that distinction, it's the difference between a language slowly fading and a language on the verge of a second life. English is number one. I could say no surprise there and move on, but that would miss the point. English did something no other language in history has ever done. Between 2011 and 2021, English gained 250 million speakers, more than any language in any decade ever recorded, 250 million people in 10 years. Here's the number that matters more than any other. Only 25% of English speakers are native speakers. 400 million people grew up speaking English, but 1.1 billion people chose to learn it. English is the first language in history where non-native speakers outnumber native speakers by more than 2 to 1, and the gap is widening every year. Think about how every other dominant language in history actually spread. Latin spread because Rome ran the administration. You spoke Latin or you didn't participate in civic life. Forced. Spanish spread because conquistadors and missionaries imposed it on conquered populations across 2 continents. Forced. French spread through colonial governments, royal courts, and Catholic missionaries. Forced. Every mega language before English got big because some form of power made people speak it. English is growing because people are choosing it. Nobody's forcing the kid in Jakarta to learn English. Nobody's mandating it in Lagos or Batoga or Lahore. They're choosing it because English is the language of 60% of all internet content. Because over 90% of scientific journals publish in English. Because English is the language of aviation, international business, global entertainment, and the tech industry. Here's the final twist that makes this extraordinary. England's birth rate is below replacement. So is America's, Australia's, Canada's. English-speaking countries are not having more children than the rest of the world. In fact, they're among the slower-growing populations in the developed world. English isn't growing because English-speaking countries are growing. English is growing because the rest of the world decided, without coordination, without any government or empire or institution telling them that English was worth learning. 1 billion independent people arrived at the same conclusion. That has never happened to any language in history. That's what number one looks like. But here's what nobody's talking about. 2 languages didn't make this list. They probably should have. Swahili, Nigerian Pidgin, both under 10 million native speakers. Both already past 80 million total speakers. Both are growing fast. Both invisible in a mainstream conversation about language. Swahili is the lingua franca of East Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, the DRC. The African Union made it official in 2004. As East Africa becomes one of the world's fastest growing economy regions, Swahili goes with it. Nigerian Pidgin, Naija, has no government behind it, no official status. Nobody promoted it. Nigeria will be the 3rd most populous country on earth by 2050, and Naija is already the language of daily life, social media, and commerce across West Africa. It grew for one reason. People found it useful. That's the point. A language that grows because people choose it, because it solves a real problem, is more durable than one that grows from birth rates or empire. It doesn't need a government to stay in power. It just needs to keep being useful. Watch those 2. This list looks very different in 50 years. The linguistic map of the world isn't fixed. It's being redrawn right now, in real time, by where people are being born and which languages they're deciding are worth their time. If you want to be a part of that, Airlearn is built exactly for this. Real language, in context. Tested so it sticks. 30+ languages. Links in the description. See you in the next one.